The body can adapt and change as a result of training to improve performance in exercise. There are different types of adaptations, such as aerobic and anaerobic, and change can occur in the cardiovascular system, respiratory system, neuromuscular system, energy systems, and the skeletal system. Sport is an example of when there would be both aerobic and anaerobic adaptations to be in a game of netball. The aerobic system will be used while they are running around the court because it is for a long duration and low intensity, so a high respiratory and cardiovascular endurance are needed. This means that the training will focus on these areas by being of a low intensity, however, for a long duration, causing the main body adaptations to be the respiratory and CV system. The anaerobic system will be used when the netballer jumps to intercept the ball, because it is a short burst of energy that is needed. Training to improve this would be of a short duration, however, a high intensity, to adapt the body to improve anaerobic performance. There are ways the body can adapt aerobically as a result of training to improve performance in a game of netball, particularly when running around the court for a long period of time. One system that adapts is the CV system. This is used in netball because it is a long endurance event and the heart needs to continuously pump blood around the body to the muscles to supply them with oxygen. One way to measure aerobic adaptation to the body after training is the VO2 max test, because it has a low intensity and a high duration. VO2 max is the maximal amount of oxygen that is utilised in the body in 1 minute. The muscles need a large supply of oxygen and the CV system is needed to pump the oxygenated blood from the heart to the muscles to supply them with oxygen. As you can see from this graph, before training the VO2 max is at around 42, which means that after that no more oxygen can be transported to the muscles for them to utilise. However, after training they have a much higher VO2 max of around 58. This is because the CV system has adapted to become more effective at transporting blood to the muscles. This means that the muscles are receiving more oxygen so they can work at a higher intensity for a longer period of time. This would benefit the netballer because a high supply of oxygen to the muscles means that they can carry on their performance for longer. A netballer would be able to continue running around the court for the whole match without fatiguing as quickly due to lack of oxygen. One way the CV system adapts is by an increased cardiac hypertrophy. This is where the heart's muscles, particularly in the left ventricle, increases in size so it can pump more blood out of the heart more powerfully. Changes that happen within the heart, such as cardiac hypertrophy, are referred to as athlete's heart and can occur in people who train for at least an hour a day for a longer period of time. These changes result in the heart's stroke volume increasing because the heart can do a bigger contraction to pump more blood out. So the heart rate decreases because it doesn't need to pump as many times for the same amount of blood to be pumped out in a minute. The increase in stroke volume increases the cardiac output, so more blood is transported to the muscles to supply them with more oxygen. This would improve a netballer's ability to continue running for a longer time because a more sufficient amount of blood and therefore oxygen would be supplied to the muscles so they can continue to contract for longer. This graph shows adaptations to the stroke volume in exercise after training. As you can see, the blue line, which represents before training, has a lower stroke volume and it also plateaus earlier when there is only 110 millimetres of blood being pumped out of the heart in one beat. This is because as the heart rate continues to increase to maintain a higher cardiac output, there isn't enough time during the passive filling phase to fully fill the heart. This means that the stroke volume can't continue to increase. However, after training there is a higher stroke volume which continues to increase even further before it plateaus out to around 150 millilitres. This causes more blood to be pumped out of the heart into the working muscles, so the performance in the netball game would improve. This graph shows how heart rate can change because of training. The untrained person's heart, represented by the blue line, rapidly increases from when the exercise first starts. However, after training, the heart rate increases more gradually because there is an increase in the stroke volume. So the heart doesn't need to work as hard to pump out the same amount of blood and maintain the same cardiac output. The heart rate range will also decrease as a result of training because the heart rate's resting values will be lower than it would be before training. This is because of the increase in stroke volume causing the heart rate to not beat as much per minute. The maximum heart rate would remain the same even after training because it is always 220 minus your age. Changes in the blood can occur as well due to training. One change is the development of capillary networks around the body. As a result of aerobic training, capillarization is increased because the amount of capillaries at the muscles and the density of the capillaries increases. This allows more blood into the capillaries network at one time, so more oxygen can be diffused into the muscles and more carbon dioxide can be removed from the muscles. A larger supply of oxygen to the muscles allows them to continue working for a longer period of time, so the performance in a netball game would be able to be sustained for longer. Another adaptation as a result of aerobic training is an increase in the amount of red blood cells in the blood. An increase in red blood cells allows more oxygen to be transported in the blood because red blood cells contain the hemoglobin that is needed to carry oxygen. This causes an enhancement in the blood's ability to carry oxygen and transport it to the working muscles. This means that after training, the muscles will receive more oxygen, so will be able to continue working for a longer period of time. Therefore, in the net game, the netballer would be able to run around the court for a longer period of time without fatiguing as quickly as they would have without training. Another change within the blood is in the blood's plasma. Although there is an increase in the amount of red blood cells in the blood, training also causes an increase in the blood's plasma. This means that the blood hematocrit, which is the ratio of red blood cell volume to the total blood volume, is reduced. This lowers the viscosity of the blood and enables the blood to flow through the vessels more easily. This also increases the amount of blood and oxygen transported to the muscles, so performance has increased as the muscles are receiving more oxygen. There are also many health benefits from training, such as a decrease in the likelihood of cardiovascular diseases, such as CHD, arteriosclerosis, atherosclerosis, and hypertension. Aerobic training helps to prevent these diseases because it improves the health of the heart to make it stronger. Another system that is adapted due to aerobic training is the respiratory system. This is important in aerobic exercise because in a game of netball because it supplies the body with oxygen and removes carbon dioxide. One aspect of the respiratory system that improves with training is ventilation, which is the amount of oxygen utilised in the body in 1 minute. This will increase after training because the body will adapt to become more efficient in inhaling and utilising oxygen. This then allows more oxygen to the muscles, so in a netball performance, the netballer will be able to continue running around the court for a longer duration of the game. Ventilation increases due to an increase in the tidal volume and breathing rate. This VO2 max graph shows the effect of training on the ability to inhale and utilise oxygen. As you can see, the untrained person has a lower VO2 max of around 45, where they are unable to utilise any more oxygen. However, the trained person has a much higher VO2 max of around 58. This is partly because of the adaptation to the respiratory system, which allow them to take in more oxygen. This would improve their performance because the muscles will be receiving more oxygen, so will be able to work for a longer duration or a higher intensity without fatiguing. Ventilation increases because of adaptation to the respiratory muscles. Training leads to an increase in the size and strength of the respiratory muscles, such as the external intercostal muscles, which are the muscles that are responsible for inhalation. This then allows them to become more efficient because they are stronger, so they can inhale more air per breath and inhale more times per minute. This increases the amount of oxygen being taken into the body, so after training the muscles will receive a greater supply of oxygen and performance from the netballer will increase. It will also cause a delay on the onset of fatigue because the netballer will be taking in a more sufficient supply of oxygen. Breathing rate increases as a result of training because the respiratory muscles become more efficient. Breathing rate increases to aid delivery of more oxygen to the worker muscles. From this graph you can see how after training there is a decrease in the breathing rate because the respiratory system becomes more effective at utilising oxygen and the tidal volume increases, so it doesn't have to be as many breaths per minute for the same amount of oxygen to be taken in. Other adaptations to the respiratory system are changes in lung volumes. The vital capacity, which is the amount of air that can be inhaled and exhaled, increases. This allows a larger tidal volume because more air is able to enter the lungs at one time, meaning that more oxygen can be entered into the body in a shorter space of time. The vital capacity can increase due to the decrease in residual capacity, which is the amount of air always left in the lungs after maximal exhalation. This means that there is more space for more air to be inhaled and exhaled, and therefore more oxygen can be taken into the body and more carbon dioxide can be removed. Training also causes an increase in capillarization around the muscles and around the lungs, and more capillaries by the alveoli for the oxygen to diffuse into the vessels from the alveoli and to carbon dioxide diffuse from the capillaries into the lungs. This causes an increase in the amount of gaseous exchange at one time, so more oxygen can enter the body to be transported to the muscles. The neuromuscular system is another system that adapts due to training to improve the body's aerobic abilities. It includes changes in muscle fibres and myoglobin and mitochondria to improve the netballer's ability to continue running around the court for the whole netball game. Training for low intensity, high duration events such as netball will increase the amount of slow oxidative fibres in a muscle. These allow contraction of muscles for longer periods of time without fatiguing as much as the other types. There is also an increase in the mitochondria in the slow oxidative fibres, which allows them to have a better ability to use oxygen. An increase in the mitochondria in the muscles causes them to have an increased oxidative capacity, so the muscles can utilise more oxygen and become more efficient. The last adaptation in this system is an increase in the muscle's ability to store myoglobin. Myoglobin stores oxygen in the muscles, so if there is more myoglobin, then more oxygen can be taken into the muscle. An increase of the oxygen in the muscles allows a performer to work for a longer period of time with a higher intensity, so therefore improving their performance in exercise. Training also causes the energy systems to adapt. The main energy system used during a game of netball where the player just continuously runs around the court is the aerobic system, because it is of a low intensity, however a high duration. Aerobic training causes an increase in the number of aerobic enzymes, which are essential for aerobic glycolysis to take place and produce energy needed to make the muscles to contract. More aerobic enzymes results in a better ability of the aerobic system to take place and resynthesize ADP back into ATP, so it can then be used to break down and release energy for the muscles to contract. This then allows the netballer to sustain the exercise of running around the court for a longer period of time without fatiguing and at a higher level of performance. It is important for energy systems to have a sufficient store supply, otherwise they would no longer be able to resynthesize ATP and produce energy to make the muscles to contract. The main fuel used in the aerobic system is glycogen, and after that's used up, fats can be used. As a result of training, the body adapts to become more efficient at using fats to resynthesize ATP. Fats are broken down into fatty acids before entering the Krebs cycle, electron transport chain, and then resynthesizing 34 ATP. If the body can use more fat, then more ATP can be resynthesized, so more energy is produced, so the muscles can contract more and performance is improved because the muscles can continue to contract for a longer period of time. The aerobic system also produces a small amount of lactic acid, which inhibits performance because lactic acid increases the acidity in the body, which denatures the enzymes needed to complete the aerobic system. This means that they can no longer be used to resynthesize ATP to produce energy for the muscles, so performance can no longer continue because the muscles don't have the energy they need to be able to contract. This graph shows how the effect of building up lactic acid, how training can affect the build-up of lactic acid. The untrained person builds up lactic acid much quicker because their lactate threshold is lower, whereas a trained person builds up lactic acid later because their lactate threshold is higher. This then means that in the trained person, obla occurs later, which is the onset of blood lactate accumulation. This always happens at 4 millimoles of lactic acid in the blood and is the point where fatigue of the muscles happens. If obla occurs later, then fatigue would also occur later. This would improve a netballer's performance aerobically because they will be able to continue running for a longer duration without fatiguing and having to stop because of the buildup of lactic acid. Aerobic training also adapts the skeletal system to benefit performance. However, for example, it can increase bone density, which helps to protect the bones from injury. However, most skeletal system adaptations come from anaerobic training.